Jonna. That was not me. Hello, welcome to the Skeptic Track for DragonCon 2024. What year is this? 2024. So, I know, it's been a long weekend. I am in a moment going to step off the panel and I'm going to allow these amazing people to talk to each other. Jamy and Swiss, take it away.
Thank you very much. Is this on? Barely. Thank you very much, Angie. And first of all, thank you for coming. Thank you for filling the room. Thank you for coming to Skeptic Track. Thank you. We've had really good turnout this year, and I love that people are interested in what we have to talk about here. And how many, if I can ask, just to have a vague idea, how many have been who are in the room have been here already for some previous talks with Jonna Mendez? Okay, a good number, but not even the majority. So that's good because we're going to kind of review some of that material, but maybe from a slightly different vantage point. So I am Jamy Ian Swiss, and I am a skeptic, a longstanding activist in the skeptic community. I'm a professional magician and an author and a self-declared expert on deception, with a lifelong passion for deceptions of all sorts: magic, con games, gambling and casino cheating. Exposing phony psychics, and that's redundant, and other kind of con artists, and all of this kind of thing. I'm interested in all of it. And a few years ago, I became interested in yet another aspect of it that I had not been previously interested in, which is the intersection of magic and magical principles with espionage and the intelligence community. And the reason I got interested is because I met this person, Jonna Mendez. And Jonna is retired from a long career in the CIA. When she left, the final 13 years of that career was as chief of disguise. And so she was kind of a cross between James Bond's Q and, if I'm dating myself, but the original Mission Impossible series, if you remember Barney, who was the disguise guy, right? And he would be able to disguise people as part of this, the undercover things they would do to play a complete another character. And then there would be a big reveal. He'd pull the mask off and you'd find out it was this, completely other person. And that was great fiction and entertainment, but it was obviously fiction, except she really has done that. And we'll touch on some of that. So anyway, and in the subsequent time, since we have become good friends, I have delved down into this, and among other things, read the 5 books now that she is responsible or partly responsible for, some on her own and some with her husband, Tony Mendez. And that name keeps coming up and will come up again today. And Tony Mendez was started with the CIA as a forger, and became an expert in taking in what's the word
Exfiltration.
It's exfiltrating people out of enemy or dangerous territory. And as part of that element of his expertise, he's the guy that the movie Argo is based on. And that was him. He dreamed up that crazy story of creating a phony film crew, film production office, the whole thing from soup to nuts, in order to openly have these 6 Americans become apparent, become visible in Iran, who had been hiding in an embassy, in order to get them out, because otherwise they would have been too obvious to sneak out. So sometimes you have to hang things out and hang a lantern on it, and this insane plan actually worked. So he was kind of a genius and a legendary character. So the interesting thing, and what we're going to get right into now. So Tony was among other things, a bit of an amateur magician. And so he thought about the world, as I see it, what I've learned about him. He thought about the world the way a magician thinks. And they came up with an idea. Well, let's start with this, because I think before we explain the thing, I think the reasoning is really interesting to make it clear. So you both came up with this idea as a way of trying to cover your your operatives on the ground in Cold War Moscow, where every move is being surveilled, but you have to connect with double agents or your agents on the ground, right? And you had an idea how to do that.
Well, where to start? This is a big topic, the topic of disguise and how we used it, how we went to LA, how we worked with a famous man out there named John Chambers, who was an Oscar-winning makeup man. He did some famous masks for Planet of the Apes, the original. He also was responsible for Spock's ears. That's a claim to fame not many people have. We started out with a relationship with him. I know, and this was all Tony. This was not really the CIA saying, why don't you go out and talk to these people. This was Tony, who was interested in magic from the very, very beginning. He ended up out in LA working with John Chambers. They were filming a terrible movie called The Island of Dr. Moreau.
Oh.
Have any of you seen it? We considered it a terrible movie, but Chambers was saying, now bear in mind, I'm making monsters. I'm not doing what you're doing. But Tony, they were on the sidelines where they were filming. They were sculpting some of the stuff that they used in the movie, and he just kind of got this bug and this wonderful idea about maybe we could do something outside of the Hollywood milieu. We started out in disguise at CIA using stunt double masks from Hollywood. You know, the ones the mask that, well, it was Rex Harrison was the first mask that we had. Rex Harrison, you're probably mostly too young, but he was really famous. He was a big, like a John Wayne kind of character, and he was classically, ruggedly good looking. And we had the aluminum mold that they used to make his stunt double masks. So we made a bunch of them. And we discovered that we could turn Rex Harrison into a woman. We could turn him into an African American. And we did. And we used that mask all over the world. He was in cars that were going by security checkpoints. You know, he was crossing international borders, sitting primly in the back seat. Rex Harrison. But they didn't know overseas who Rex Harrison was. So that was okay. We had 3 sizes, large, medium, and small. And I forget the other 2. Alan Ladd was one of them. These are old-time movie stars. That's where we began. And it was interesting because, like in South Africa back then, when apartheid was a thing, if you had 2 people of mixed race together anywhere, in a car, on a street, on a park bench, wherever they were, a white person and an African-American person, a cop would emerge out of the bushes and say, is everything okay here? And ask to see your identification. So we used those stunt double masks to make them the same. It'd be either 2 women or 2 Africans or 2 Caucasians, but the cops would leave us alone. That was just the beginning of an idea of how we might use Hollywood technology. But those things, they were uncomfortable. If you were in South Africa, you were gonna drown in perspiration inside the mask. And then we kind of segued. The next generation was what we called SAMs, semi-animated masks, and they were half masks, kind of like a Lone Ranger mask with a wig attached. And it was your jaw, your mouth, probably your beard and mustache, although we could add those if we needed to. And now you could talk. You could say to the officer, yes, officer, I'm moving along now. You could do something like that, but you couldn't have a real conversation because the rest of it didn't move, and it would be clear that something was wrong with your face. It was your eyes, and it was your chin. Well, when I came into disguise, that's the state of the art, and we started a program trying to figure out how to make a full face animated mask. We could do full face with the stunt double masks. That wasn't good enough. We do the half masks. That wasn't good enough. We wanted the whole face. It took us 10 years. It took us as long to do that as it took us to find bin Laden. Think about that. And we finally put it all together, and we came up with a pretty remarkable thing. Now, I have pictures. They're in my books. They're online. If you ever Google me, you can't miss these pictures of me in the Oval Office briefing President George H.W. Bush, sitting behind that resolute desk. He was not a cheerful man. I didn't ever really see him smile until I sat there that day and I did a little PR. I brought some pictures of him because he had previously been the head of CIA, just briefly, but he was there. He was actually, he was well loved. But we had done some disguises for him just for fun. Showed him those pictures. That's the first time I saw him laugh. And then I said, now I'm here to show you the latest, greatest thing we've ever made. It's really good. You're going to love this. I'm going to take it off now, and I'm going to show it to you. And I reach over to begin the Tom Cruise peel, but he didn't know what I was going to do. He said, no, stop. Well, don't take it off. And he got up and he walked over and he walked around me, and he's trying to find, I don't know, a seam. He's trying to find whatever I'm wearing and where does it begin and where does it end. And he couldn't. So he sat down and he said, okay, do it. So I did it. I took it off and I'm holding it in the air. My head, with a full head of hair, dark hair, is really pretty. The mask was really pretty. The hair was good. I wanted to take it home with me, but I could not.
And to be clear, you had been present as a young African American woman.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden I'm me, and the thing is in the air. There was a man in the room. I always have to tell this because this is one of the things I vividly remember. His name was John Sununu. He was an aide to Bush, and he was going to present next, and he had notes. And while I'm talking and showing him all my stuff, he's over there and he's erasing things in his notes and he's adding stuff in, and he's, you know, I would probably be the same if I was going second. But when he looked up and saw me holding my head in the air, he let out this little squeal that was just, that's what I remember from that moment, is that I shocked that man. What President George Bush did was he just sparkled like he'd been on a vacation and gotten a tan. He was so pleased to see this thing we had brought, and I was pleased because that program that this was one of the first pieces in was going to be really expensive. It was going to take a whole bunch of money, and having the President of the United States voice his approval of your project was a good way to go after that budget. So that was kind of the beginning of.
And something to keep in mind with this is that part of the requirements of what you're doing, because we see all sorts of elaborate makeup effects and mask effects and so forth in film and television, but the difference is that this has to be applied quickly.
Yeah,
without necessarily always a lot of assistance or
That's
ideal conditions.
that is a good
right?
point.
You've told me that you could put this mask on in the dark without a mirror.
You put it on in a car and in a dark parking garage without a mirror because the thing only fit you, and it didn't click into place, but it settled, and you just knew it was right.
You use the word register, right?
Let's call it register. That's a good word. Pat the hair down, get out of the car, and go into wherever you were going to go in. It was a sea change for us that we could do this, and it was a sea change on more than one level. First of all, we could protect our officers, and I have to say, as chief of disguise, I always thought of my work as protection for both our officers and the foreigners who were the ones risking their lives working with us, providing us with intelligence. When we started working with terrorists and against the narcotics target down in Latin America, these guys, our enemy, the nature of our enemy changed. They were half of them criminals. A good number of them were armed, and they'd shoot you in a heartbeat. They'd shoot you if they thought you might be DEA, Drug Enforcement Agency. They'd shoot you if they thought you were just the wrong person in the wrong time, somebody from North America that didn't belong in that alley, in that street, in that bar. They'd just kill you. So our officers being able to look like they were Latin American, say, saved some lives. And I have to tell you, I've never told anybody this story. At the International Spy Museum, I'm a board member, a founding board member. 23 years I've been associated with them. We had a cocktail party for some really important people not long ago, and a governor was there with his staff, a governor who's important to that museum. And I'm being social. I'm such an introvert. I really am. So this takes a lot of energy. But I'm chatting with everybody. Got my drink, and this tall, good-looking older man walks up to me, and said, "I've been looking for you." I'm like, "Yeah, go on." He said, "I've been kind of thinking of trying to find you ever since we met years ago." He said, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, I remember you. I came into your disguise lab. I needed some work. I needed a disguise. You gave me a disguise." He said, "I always wanted to circle back and tell you that that disguise you gave me saved my life." And I almost dropped my drink. I almost cried. It was, you never get feedback.
Never get feedback.
You never see these people again, and you never remember them either. So, that's just out of nowhere because I just thought of it this minute, and this whole talk is gonna be like that, because Jamy and I, we are not working from notes, we're just here.
That's really good. And of course, you remembered the instance once.
Well, I didn't say, "Tell me the story," but while I'm here, I'm thinking I'm gonna go back to the museum. Now I know, there's a picture of him. We're gonna track him down. I'm gonna
That's
get the
incredible.
story. I wanna find out.
That's
Tell
great.
me how that worked, I wish I'd known about
So I'm
that.
interested in the application, not just the devices, but so obviously, yes, here's a case where someone was disguised and therefore was able to make some sort of escape or something like that. But there's subtler applications, for example, of creating doubles. So when
Well,
you're in Moscow,
Yeah,
right, and you
Yeah.
have a need, so some of your staff, some staff present in the embassy are actually intelligence people who are looking to meet with local agents or double agents, and you're under
Sure.
constant surveillance. And the only way, and somehow you have to either pass information or connect directly and actually have a conversation. And that's the problem you're constantly facing, and you can't have just one solution. You have to have
Yeah.
multiple solutions.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of this was really applied, right?
When we talk about worst case scenario, when I was working, and mind you, everything shifts, but when I was working, Moscow was the hardest place for a CIA officer to get anything done. And it was at the top of our target list. The information we were collecting um, was going to come out of Moscow. And by the way, just to clarify, I mean, the purpose, what we're doing out there, what we're doing around the world, we're doing it everywhere but in America, is collecting intelligence on the plans and intentions of our enemies. It doesn't matter what decade you're talking about, it never changes. The plans and what are they going to do? What is their next plan? This year it's Putin, it's China, it's North Korea. 20 years ago the list would be slightly different. It's always the same thing though. Our government needs to be ready for whatever is coming. Right now, I know there's a lot of emphasis on nuclear programs. Where are they? Can they produce them yet? How close are they to producing them? How many of them can they produce? When it was Cuba, it was like, when are those missiles going to be operational? What is their throw weight? What are the targets? We are always directed by Washington, D.C., the White House, State Department, the information that they need to make. Okay, so a lot of it would come out of Moscow. And Moscow was a really hard place to work because of many things, but the KGB was probably number one reason it was so difficult. We had dedicated surveillance teams. They had warming rooms around our embassy in nice weather. I'm not sure where they waited, but when we would walk out or drive out of the embassy, the guard at the gate would pick up the phone. He'd say, "Target number 11 just left," and they'd fall in behind you. So say you're walking. Say you're in the middle of the city. You're going to go out. You're going to pick up a newspaper. You're going to get a cup of coffee. You're going to do something. Maybe your real goal is to mail a letter. That's an operational act. Maybe your real goal is to make a phone call. That's an operational act. You can't do that with surveillance on you. So the problem that we took, actually Hollywood came into this problem solving scenario. How can we get out of that surveillance net without them knowing? Without them knowing we're out. It would be a deception. We needed an illusion. And it was Hollywood who said, well, the masks that you're using could be one way to do this. And so what we invented and what we were doing is we would walk out of our embassy, surveillance team would come in behind you, go down the street, you'd pause in front of a kiosk. You need a newspaper. You'd step into the kiosk to get the newspaper or a pack of cigarettes or whatever, and then you'd step back out and you'd go on down the street. But now it wasn't you that they were following. It was what we called U2. It was the other you. It was the second you. You were still in the kiosk. And you could, the second you looked just like you, same face, same hair, same clothes, same everything. And that would go on all day. And somewhere around noon, the KGB would get on the phone to their control and say, oh, yeah, we got him. We've been with him every minute. He's good. He's not doing anything provocative. We'll check in, later in the day. And they'd report to their bosses at the end of the day, he didn't even make one suspicious move. Where our case officer had gone out, done what he needed to do, circled back to the second stop, maybe not a kiosk this time, but something like it, where U2 steps into the kiosk, the real case officer steps out, heads back for the embassy. The beauty of it was you could do it over and over. They never knew. They never knew you even did it. But this takes it kind of to the stage.
And the real case officer might also, in some of those cases, apply some simplified, make a mask or some, or disguise, some kind of disguise element also, so that when he walks out of the kiosk, he doesn't look like how he walked in.
You could do multiple layers of this thing. Yeah, you could make it as multi-layered as you needed it to do. The case officer, what he needed to do was make a phone call, maybe mail a letter, put down a dead drop, put up a signal, because Moscow was so dangerous, not for us, but for the Russians that were working with us. If the KGB could identify who they were, these Russians that are betraying their country, they would arrest them and they would kill them. And so everything we did was considered in personal communications. We never walked up to our foreign agent and handed him something or took something from him. That was too dangerous. Everything was, we would do dead drops. We would put things that looked innocuous, dead rats, full of rubles and microdots and some secret writing, because nobody's going to touch a dead rat. And then we'd put a signal up, a chalk mark on a prearranged stop sign or a building or a car. And then he would go pick it up. And then he has to put up a mark on a building or someplace that we are going to look for. So it's like a ballet. It's like choreography to just transfer information back and forth, but protect the foreigner, protect our case officers.
And then you had an idea, for you and Tony or whomever else, had the idea of having that duplicate person not actually be a live person and be a dummy.
Oh.
And the reason for this first was just to establish a reason, and then you can tell the story. The reason for this, as I understand it, is somebody realized that when you were being tailed, when the KGB was tailing people every time someone walked out of the embassy, but they would still keep a certain distance. And then if you made two rapid turns,
Right turns.
Yep. You would have a window after the second turn of maybe 90 seconds.
No.
Before, was it more than that?
15.
15. Oh,
Max.
that's small. Okay.
Let's
So
call it.
15 seconds. So there's a blank spot.
Yeah.
Because they're keeping a certain distance and they have to make the turn. And so there's a blank spot. And you had the idea that if you could instantly create a duplicate in the car,
Mm-hmm.
in that window, that dark window, then the person could roll out of the car and then be free. And so you went about trying to solve that first to your own in-house people in Langley.
You had to be fairly athletic to be a CIA officer back then, because we asked them to do some remarkable things. Yeah, this was. Can I tell them the whole story?
Please.
It's a little lengthy, but it's kind of fun. Is Nick still here in the room? Nick is gone. Good, because Nick knows one of the people I'm going to talk about. He might not like what I'm going to say. So Tony was in southern India having a beer at an outdoor cafe with a colleague, and they decided at that time that they needed a pop-up dummy for a car. And they wrote it down while they're at this place, and they went back to the office and they sent it off. Tony said like a rocket. They sent it back to headquarters like we need to do this. And that started a new program to build a pop-up dummy. Now, we didn't know how to do that. My office, which was like Q in the Bond movies, it was chemists and physicists and engineers, all kinds of engineers, people that were so narrow in their skills, I don't know if they could have been hired anywhere else, but we liked them a lot. A guy that did nothing but batteries, a woman that did nothing but ink, a man who was a world champion hot air balloon person. You knew everything about them. You had to have all these odd skills. So we got some of our engineers together. We explained what we wanted to do, and this whole thing fell to these two brothers who are in my new book. I saw them recently, and they've read the book, and they're okay with it. So I feel good. These two brothers were, I say in the book, they were nerds before nerd was a word. They were geeks before we ever coined that phrase. They were the ultimate. They were like almost cartoonish. They were brothers. They were just exactly alike. They dressed alike. So that means that their pants were too high and they were too short. They had all the pins in their pocket. In the winter, they wore those hats with the flaps that stick out like this. And they were always together, and they lived together. And they were brilliant. They were genius. These guys were so smart. So they got the project. We're going to build this dummy. And Tony came back from India. He said, okay, I would suggest we start out, we go to a place you know rather well. They sent him down to Al's Magic Shop down by the White House to buy a half dozen party dolls. Has anyone here ever heard of a party doll? Is there a better way to say it?
Inflatable. And that's as far as we're going to go.
Inflatable party dolls. And they said, well, how many? And Tony said, 6. So these guys, if they could have worn masks, I think they would have. They went to Al's. They bought 6 inflatable party dolls. They brought them back. They said, don't ever ask us to go there again. So our engineering people set to work on how we're going to do this. Well, we're going to put them in a briefcase, and we'll compress the thing into a briefcase. We only needed the top half of the party doll, so we did that. We tied it off. We got compressed gas that would fit in the briefcase, 2 canisters of it, and rigged it up so that you would push a button and the briefcase would open and the doll would pop up. That was the beginning. That was the prototype. Problem with that one was the doll would not go down.
Write your own joke.
I love working with you.
We should take this act on the road.
We could. The Magic Castle would be appalled. Okay, so you drive by those old car dealerships and there's that thing out front that's doing this, waving in the breeze. That's what our pop-up dummy, called a jib, a jack-in-the-box. That's what the jib was doing. Everything was working, but we couldn't get it to. So what we did is what we always did when we ran into a real roadblock. We went to Hollywood. We went to the Magic Builders, and we said, "Here, let us show you this raggedy thing we
And
have
you did
made."
test one of these in the field.
Oh, I left that out. That's why we went to Hollywood. We thought we'd give it a field test like you would any piece of equipment. We sent it to an East European country. We had one of our contract wives take it for a joyride and hit the button, and the doll did pop up, and then she exploded into 1,000 bits because the compressed air that was coming out was so cold that it froze the plastic and it
Shattered it.
And we're lucky we didn't lose the contract wife. She could have had a wreck. How would she explain that to the cop in a foreign country? Oh, officer, I was just driving with my briefcase.
And this damn doll came out of it.
Yeah. So we took our toy, our jib, to LA to one of the Magic Builders, and he looked at it and he said, What is it supposed to do? And we said, just pop up.
So this is Tony because he had an interest in magic and said, well, okay, our guys can't figure this out. They don't have the tools for this. So let's go to Hollywood.
Yeah.
Let's talk to illusion builders,
Yeah.
people who design illusions for magicians. And let's talk to Hollywood special effects people about the disguise, which you've heard some of that. Chambers, who won an honorary Oscar for his film work, also ended up winning an award from the CIA for his, this is true.
He won the Intelligence Medal of Merit.
Yeah.
He's the only civilian
To ever win it.
to ever receive it.
Right. So, but anyway, so on the magic side, they go to magic builders to solve this problem. And indeed, they find a builder who does solve this problem
Oh, yes.
and builds this dummy into a briefcase that not only pops up and is solid and convincing, and it's obviously dressed and disguised to look like the person it's switching in for, but is actually slightly animated, right? Like this.
There was a cable and a little release, and you could talk to it.
So describe the actual application here now. I've already set it up with the turns on the car, right?
Well, how it works is you're driving down the street, your surveillance is behind you. This is also choreographed because you know where you're going. You're looking for a place where you've got 2 right turns. And you're wanting to be like an hour out into this drive before you do this, so your surveillance people will relax. It's just a normal day, just a common drive. You're not going to do anything special. You make the first right turn, and the case officer makes sure that the briefcase is standing up on the floor. On the second right turn, the door opens. We have taken the brake lights out of consideration. We've turned them off, and the dome light, they're not even on. He steps out of the car and leaves the briefcase on the seat. As the door closes, the driver hits the button. He finishes that right turn. The dummy is up, and the surveillance team would, somewhere between 10, maybe 15 seconds, but not much more, would come around that second corner and see you, not speeding up, but going at a nice slow pace, regular speed, down the street, still 2 people in the car. And you could drive around with that dummy all day. You could have endless conversations. You could say everything you ever wanted to say to your wife, but you were afraid to say it. At the end of the day, we would have done a second choreography where the real case officer would get back in the car, where the dummy would go back on the floor in the.
Wow, amazing.
Now, a man named Daniel Hoffman wrote a book called The $1 Billion Spy about maybe 5-6 years ago, and the first chapter in that book is describing our chief of station in Moscow desperately trying to reach this Russian who's his name is about to be revealed in America. And when it's revealed, KGB is going to come after him and arrest him. And the only way they could figure out to make this work was to use the jib. I'm not there anymore, so I wasn't there when this happened. It was so fun to hear that they're still using it. So the chief of station got out of the car, the jib popped up. They went and they talked to the Russian. The Russian said, he's typical Russian. He said, I'm not leaving. They can come and get me. I'm a war hero. They're not going to touch me. Blah, 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 blah. And, but that time, the jib wasn't in a briefcase. That time, the jib was in a birthday cake. And it's just, it's kind of.
And sitting on a person's lap, right, in the back seat, I think.
It had, the 2 wives were in the back and the 2 gentlemen were in the front. They were supposed to be going to a birthday party.
Right.
And they'd been talking about it in the embassy all day about the birthday party because they know the KGB is listening to the phones. So the KGB was expecting 2 couples to come out and get in that car and go to a birthday party. And it was all set up because it was going to be in a birthday cake. And they handed it through the seats. And when he got out, he just set the cake down and the driver hit the button.
And you know these things were successful because you use them over and over again,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. When they're successful, nobody ever knows that you've used them, and so you can do it again and again, until somewhere along the line someone figures it out. We used to say any piece of spy gear that we had, anything at all that we had a life. Right. Once you put it out there in the field, they're gonna capture one. They're gonna bring it home, and they're gonna look at it and admire it and say, oh my God, look what the Americans did now. Look at this. Can we make this? Olaf, can we make this? Yeah, we'll make one. We'll make it better. And there's a long tradition of our toys going back and forth and being improved over time.
Yeah. And once you found these illusion builders in LA, you use them for other things as well. And there's a couple of really clever designs that are really adapted directly from stage illusions. Part of large scale stage illusions sometimes involve hiding a person in an apparently empty box, for example, until they appear, or hiding them after they disappear, or hiding half of them while you were cutting them in half. There's all these rather elaborate and precise principles that expert builders and design illusion designers use, and you put some of these to work as ways that you could take a body out right in front of, right in the open.
Yeah. At one point, we went to Peshawar. It was a dedicated trip to go up into Afghanistan because we were concerned that a Soviet military officer might defect to the American embassy, might just come walking in the door. Now, remember that when the Soviets were in Afghanistan, they were so hated. They were hated. And we thought, how would we ever get him out of the American embassy? Somebody would shoot him. They'd be out there with guns, really waiting for him to come out. So the question was, how would we get him out of the embassy? And then the second question, how would we get him across the border into Pakistan? Well, out of the embassy was the first problem we took to the magic builders. How could we get him out of an embassy? And we kept going to this one particular person who Jamy knows very well, who's just so inventive. And what he built for us, this was just a contingency plan. In case that Soviet walked into our embassy, we were going to show him this. But what he built for us was, you know what a dolly, a hand truck, you know what that is? They're everywhere. They're in every warehouse. That's how you move boxes. That's how you move refrigerators. Everything, you move them on hand trucks. So this had universal application, actually, this thing that he built. He had a hand truck, and on this particular device, he put a load of 3 crates of bottled water that were not crates of bottled water. They just looked like crates of bottled water. They were a concealment device that would hold a human being.
So big like water fountain bottles, right?
Yeah.
Which is transparent.
Yeah, to the eye. I mean,
You see right through it.
This is
just framed in a case.
This is the perfection of how they think. Because show them this box of transparent stuff. There cannot be someone there. It just can't be. It's like David Copperfield cannot fly. There can't be anybody there. But of course, there was somebody there. It was just kind of genius. And this one magic builder in particular, we signed contracts. He worked for us under a classified confidential contract and did some amazing things. We actually flew him out to Moscow to take a look. And he got so scared out there. He said that when he was walking out on the tarmac to get into the plane, he was almost convinced that they were going to shoot him, that there were guns out there somewhere. He just got so paranoid seeing how it works in Moscow. He said, he almost had a heart attack walking to the plane to leave. He didn't think they were going to let him leave.
And so you could apparently see through these bottles, and there were actually reflective mylar surfaces inside. And there's the old magician principle that it's much better to fool someone by allowing them, and rather than to go out of your way to prove something explicitly, look, my hands are empty while you're hiding something or whatever, or look, the box is empty, but rather to just allow people to discover for themselves that the box is empty or hands are empty, but just by casually looking at it themselves and without trying to prove anything with opening or closing or whatever. So what could be more, and why would you even think that you could be looking for someone and that guy's going to walk by with that hand truck full of water bottles, and they're not even going to look twice at it.
So
and it was also
you don't have to sell the idea.
Exactly. And there was a variation on this also with like a luggage cart coming out of a hotel, that it was piled with luggage with various random, the way you squeeze a bunch of different kind of non-matching luggage together, pile it up for, a bellhop to wheel out to the car. Well, they built one of those and you could hide a person in that.
It took imagination to creativity. You always had to be thinking about what's next, because no matter how prepared you got, you never knew what was going to be coming. Can I talk just for a minute about that quick change thing that he did?
Please.
Okay. So we had another idea that had to do with quick change. And we used a lot of people. We used costuming people outside of CIA. We used,
We got time.
was that my watch speaking? What we did, Tony and I demonstrated to the chief.
It's a message from the farm saying you better not tell this story.
I don't know, shut up, Jonna. We're gonna come and get you. Tony was always interested in quick change disguise in the way we used it. And he had this idea, and it was so interesting, but just bizarre. And he had to show it to our director in order to even begin working on it. So it was all homemade. He made it himself. We didn't have any contractors helping. We didn't have anybody doing anything. This was just my husband. And what he did, we demonstrated it to our office director at the end of a long, dark hall, maybe as long as this room. And it was under low light conditions. But Tony started out at one end of the room, just standing there in a business suit and a raincoat with a briefcase, suit and tie, briefcase, raincoat. And he started walking towards our director, who's at the far end of the hall. And I'm sitting next to him because our director had narcolepsy. And my job, among many things, was to kick him if he went to sleep in the middle of this. Because you never knew when it was.
It's a comedy sketch.
You never knew.
We need to recreate this for Saturday Night Live.
You never knew when he was going to go to sleep. So Tony starts walking toward him, and the first thing he did was he took off his raincoat. But he didn't take it off normally. He peeled it off. He held the sleeves and turned the sleeves inside out. He turned the whole coat inside out, and you discovered that the inside of it was a kind of scruffed up, not very good looking pink women's coat. It kind of looked dirty. So he's got this pink coat on now, and he took a few more steps, and he pulled up one of his pant legs, and it caught on the Velcro that he had already attached to his leg, pulled the other one up, and now you see that my husband is wearing black women's stockings. He took another couple of steps, reached down, pulled off a shoe cover, one shoe, the other shoe, put them in his shirt, which was fake buttoned. It was just open, put him in the shirt. So he now has a bosom, and he's wearing black Mary Janes with his black stockings. It just went on and on and on. He had a wig. The wig was attached to the shawl collar of the coat. So when he pulled the shawl collar up, the wig came up. It was all gray and tangled and hanging down. Now he really looks like this kind of hag, who you'd have maybe a street person. You might have trouble approaching this person if you saw her. And he just kept walking toward the directory. Gray hair, pink coat, black stockings, black Mary Janes. He took his briefcase, set it down, and gave it a jerk, and it popped up into a shopping cart full of groceries. And when he ended up standing in front of our office director in this get-up, the office director really loved it. And he gave us permission to pursue that whole idea of that quick change that could be done so easily. So if you look, on Google, if you Google me and look at Wired.com, there is a really quick video of my son in New York when we made the Wired piece, coming out of an office building wearing a suit and tie. He's doing a similar thing, but he's being filmed now by the Wired.com film crew. Jesse comes out. The first thing he does is he pulls off his tie because it was Velcro on the back. He just pulled it off, rolled it up, stuck it in his pocket. Second thing he did was he pulled off his shirt because it was Velcroed. It had no sleeves. It was like a dickie. He reached in his pocket, pulled out one of those flimsy bags from the grocery, put his shirt in the flimsy bag. He's walking in a crowd. He's walking at lunch in Manhattan. He takes off the jacket that he has on. It's like one of those unstructured linen jackets. Takes it off, rolls it up, stuffs it in that same bag. And now he's wearing, all of a sudden, a black tank top. He puts in his AirPods. They're the kind with wires, so he's listening to his music. He's got on a black tank top. He's got full sleeve tattoos, which I put on him the night before in a hotel, and a watch that looks like a gangster watch. That's all I can say. It's just a really the worst watch I could find. And he reaches in another pocket. He's got a beanie. He pulls it down, a knit cap. Reaches in another pocket. He puts on his Ray-Bans, and now he's just a dude, just walking down the street, kind of bopping down the street with his music in the middle of a crowd. And the film crew couldn't find him for a minute. And of course, that's the whole point. That's the whole point, that you can do all of these things incrementally on a street, walking. The crowd is your best defense. And you can get away with murder, and nobody really will notice.
And they had to reshoot that because they basically yelled cut and ran up and said, "Where was he?" And the film crew was supposed to be following. Is that the same? Is that a different one? What show is that?
That was for a PBS show.
Okay. But it was a similar kind of thing, right?
That was a training film, Tony and me against the FBI. And the FBI really was stupid to accept that challenge. And the first mistake they made was the mistake, we built the whole thing knowing that this would be their first mistake. And they assumed that Tony, the guy, would be the person that they wanted to keep an eye on. And the wife, So we started out in Georgetown. They followed us around. They were really discreet. They were really good. They're following Tony mostly. And I went up the stairs in a restaurant and came down as a woman and came down as an old man. We walked out the door, and a friend of mine who I'd asked to meet us there, because you can't cheat in these things. There is no such thing as cheating in a surveillance. Everything is possible. I'd asked my friend, I said, "What do you do Thursday morning?" She said, "I walk dogs." I said, "You want to be here with some dogs at 9:15 on Thursday morning?" She said, "Yeah." So I walked down. Now, I have a dog, and I'm an old man, and they're following Tony, who hasn't done a thing, and Tony looks suspicious to them, though, so they kept following him. And at the end of it, we end up at, I'm smoking a cigar. I'm smoking this cigar. And we ended up at Dean and DeLuca in Georgetown. And I took the document. This whole thing the setup was I was going to pass a classified document to a terrorist. And so I slid it across the table to her. I took a puff on my cigar. And I looked out the window where I knew the film crew was. And this woman in the back of the restaurant stands up and says, "Cut!" And everybody in the restaurant just jerks alive, like, "What? Cut, cut." She came over, she said, "They didn't see you coming. The film crew didn't. The only people who knew where I was going to end up. They didn't recognize you. They didn't know it was you. They didn't see you coming. We have to reshoot it."
And then they had to reenact it.
So you can actually look that up. It's called Hounds and Hares, and that is also on. All this stuff is online, and you can kind of see.
That's terrific. And this thing of passing something off like that and disguising it. So it's fun to talk about all this gadgetry and hidden boxes and concealed devices and masks, and it's all great and astonishing and fascinating. But to me, as a magician, what's most interesting to me is where they're using the psychology of magic rather than these devices. And I think it's in Moscow Rules, where they tell a story where they had, by consulting with magicians, devised a way of doing a physical handoff of something under surveillance.
Yeah.
And their superior, I'm going to ask you to clarify the details in a moment, their superior thought this would never work, and I'm not going to authorize this, it's too dangerous, it's never going to work. And so basically Tony said, "Well, why don't we set up a demonstration?" I think it was at a local mall or something. "Why don't we set up a demonstration? You'll know what's involved. You'll know what we're trying to do. We're trying to hand something over, transfer something between two people, and we'll put you in a position where you can see everything from above, and you'll tell us afterwards, did you see it or did you not?" Right? Have I got this right?
You got it right.
They're using a newspaper cover kind of thing as a switch.
A raincoat, I think, and a newspaper.
And a newspaper switch.
Yeah.
And this is totally psychological. This is what magicians talk all the time, and it's very hard for people to understand that the so-called secret to a magic trick, a trap door where you put the mirror, what the sleight of hand maneuver is just this coarse, physical, mechanical, skillful thing at the bottom that by itself won't fool anybody. No matter how perfectly you do it, it will not fool anybody. And that to create an illusion is really a delicate thing where you have to layer everything on top to control the spectator's attention, to control their assumptions, their thinking. These is all, we use the word misdirection, which sounds like distraction. It's the opposite of distraction. It's about focusing people's attention, and then so that you can control what they don't see and what they don't notice. And this is what really makes magic work. So I love this particular story. And why, can you just
Yeah,
fill in the...
you told me that. He reminds me of things that I've told him, and then I've forgotten, and I move on. But you don't forget, which is very handy, especially in a show like this. We did that. That was with Tom Karamessinas, who was a very, very senior CIA officer. And when we would bring new ideas of how to do an operational act, when we would bring them forward, someone had to approve them. We couldn't just start doing these things, so we needed permission. And this was beautiful because we set it up and said, oh, you can actually watch this happen, and we'll be very interested in your opinion. And so what I'm remembering is at the Mayflower. I think it was at the Mayflower Hotel, big old hotel in Washington, D.C. And we had two people there, and they were going to kind of not bump into each other, but they were going to pass each other coming through the big door to the hotel. And one of them had a newspaper, one of them had a raincoat. And I remember the man's name was Dan. Dan came through the door, and his misdirection was to take the raincoat, which he was carrying, from one arm to the other.
Right.
And that's what they were watching. They thought, oh, well, we saw him move the raincoat. But there was also a newspaper that they didn't focus on and didn't pay any attention at all. I think it was like the newspaper and the raincoat were here, and then the raincoat went there. And anyway, when it was done, Mr. Karamessinas said, so when are they going to do it? And we got approval. And that turned out to be a thing. That's just
And
one
there
of
are
the
many
ways.
magic applications where that kind of
Yeah.
switch, because the viewer thinks that they're seeing the newspaper in a continuous view, but in fact one is being taken out of view and another being allowed to come into view. And there's just nothing to draw your attention to it. And that is a purely magic principle. And in my own talk here, I quoted extensively from John McLaughlin, former deputy director of the CIA, who's also an amateur magician.
Yeah.
And he teaches today at Johns Hopkins. He teaches future intelligence operators, amongst other types of students, and he uses magic all the time in teaching magical principles. And the bottom line, what John says is that if you learn to think like a magician, you're going to be a better operative. We have a few minutes for questions if people want to come up to the microphone. If you have anything for us.
You could ask Jamy
Anybody?
to do a trick for you.
Trick, Jamy?
Yeah, no. I did that last night.
Yeah, we watched you. It's very, very, very good. I think this still goes on at CIA. I'm not absolutely sure, but why would you walk away from this kind of successful
Yeah,
operational
John said he
activities?
thinks that there's still a presence of it.
Yeah,
But this is the kind of thing that happens in the corporate world too, with me even as a speaker talking about principles of magic as applied to, I often talk about information design, user interface, and user experience, and you're always going to have people who are skeptical, why are we listening to a magician? And I'm sure you had the same, Tony had the same resistance, but of course results are what matter. Sir?
Hi there, thank you, very interesting. I was curious, you had mentioned that the Russians kind of learned stuff from you, and we learned stuff from the Russians, and I assume other countries too. So what's your favorite thing that you can recall that the U.S. picked up from an adversary and refined and made it better?
there was a rollover camera that was really, really interesting to me. It was you'd have a document. It was a device that was a camera or a Xerox. I'm not sure how to even categorize it, but you would just roll the thing.
It's a scanner.
Just
an
didn't,
early form of.
it was a portable
type of mechanics.
scanner, and you could copy anything just by doing that. We liked that a lot. That was a Russian, and so that was one of those that we improved it. We made our own version of it. We made it smaller. We made it easier. The Russians, for all their, there's a kind of third world quality to a lot of the stuff that the Russians do. But I have to say, their technology was elegant. They were working with not so many tools and not such a span of capabilities, and they produced these amazing pieces of equipment. They were really good.
I love that you didn't even have to think about that. You had an instant answer, and you probably have 10 more. Next question.
So I was just curious, with all the facial recognition, the, advances in technology, if you think that there's still a significant place for this, or if there's actually even maybe more of a need, or just sort of, your thoughts on how some of the technology like facial recognition is changing the sort of technical operations that you were involved in.
Well, the honest truth is, I would kill to be able to answer your question. But I have no need to know anymore, and I'm not really going to be told. I still have good contacts with the agency and with the intelligence community. My first reading on it was that, intelligence is a human-to-human conversation. You can't take people out of it, and people have to cross borders, and people have to meet up somehow. And if you're being stymied in one way with cameras on every street corner, or I don't know, all the possibilities today, you will invent other ways, because to continue doing the work and getting the information that is kind of the lifeblood of a lot of what we do, you have to come up with a way to conduct espionage. It is a person-to-person kind of activity. You can't do espionage just with technology. You have to, first of all, find the person who has the information. You have to look them in the eye. You have to establish a relationship, because you're asking them to take an enormous risk. If you're asking a Russian to work for you, a CIA officer, it's understood that if they catch him, they will kill him, and he knows that. So you make a pact up front. If you'll work for us, here's what we promise you. We will be ready to swoop in and get you the hell out of Russia at a moment's notice. We'll have passports. We'll have everything ready. That was Tony Mendez's.
So it's interesting about this facial recognition issue, because as much as almost 20 years ago, I produced a special for the Discovery Channel called Cracking the Con Games. And in that, I did 2 segments with the help of a friend of mine who is a longtime top casino security guy in Vegas. I've spent a lot of time sitting up in the eye in the sky rooms. And that eye in the sky technology has changed over the years. It's a predator and prey game. And the eye in the sky got that expression because in the early days of casinos, it was a guy crawling around on a catwalk with binoculars, eyes in the sky, looking at the tables. And then eventually, so we have these, PTZ cameras, pan, tilt, zoom, that used to be really grainy and hard, but experts could pick out what was happening. Now those cameras are much, much better, magnification, color, light, et cetera, et cetera. But about 20 years ago, I went into a casino. The casino let us come in with a crew to the eye in the sky room, and they were using early facial recognition. And so, because, they're identifying people if it's a cheater who they've blocked, right? They want to identify him if he comes back into the casino. And so we did a thing where I walked into the casino kind of looking like myself, and the camera tracked me through the casino and going sitting down in the game. And then I did a few things to disguise myself, right? And, sunglasses and a different hat, a big hat, and something else, or a couple of things. And walked through, and that software nailed me. Now, that's 20 years ago. And today that, you go through your photos on your iPhone, and if you attach a name to a person, it recognizes that name. It's the same kind of thing. Now, what that technology is really, it's not actually looking at every detail. It's looking at certain key things, and also it's measuring distances,
They
right?
can't,
Like
they
nose,
can't be changed.
right? Things that you cannot change, right? That's what it's really testing. Distances, nose to eyes and things like that. So the real question, and neither one of us know the answer, we could guess, we could theorize,
Yep.
but if you're gonna fool that, you have to develop something that's gonna fool those specific means of measurement.
You have to
Which is not the
obscure- you
same
have
as
to-
fooling a human eye.
You have to obscure them sometimes.
Yeah.
And you know, some of those cheaters you talked about that were banned from the casinos, they contacted us years ago. They were gonna pay us huge money to disguise them so that they could get back into the casinos.
Yeah, yeah.
And we didn't do it.
That's hilarious.
My
Yeah,
husband
that's
said, I
totally
can see the headline in the Washington Post now.
hilarious.
No, we're not gonna do that. We didn't do it.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for your attention and
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jonna.
Thank you, Jamy. We really appreciate your, this is wonderful. Thank you so much. And Jamy is responsible for bringing both Jonna and Katie Coleman this year. So thank him very much.
Yes, indeed.